The agape love that Paul describes in this 13th chapter is familiar to many. We had picked it up a little bit this past fall, and we said that it was more marriage counseling than marriage invitation. We know that there are divisions in Corinth, as Normally had shared. And this passage is in a tradition of writing at that time known as an encomium, a passage focused on lifting up a virtue, saying what it is, saying what it's not, and inviting listeners to do what it says. Paul is writing to this community with a deep hope that they will find resolution amongst their leadership, of which there has been some question, that they will start sharing their communal meals in a more open fashion so that those of different socioeconomic means would come to the table at the same time and enjoy their meals together. He also speaks into sexual morality, and he talks about the gifts of the Spirit, not to be jealous over what someone else has by way of prophecy or another gift in community. There are many parts to the one body. That happens right before our reading. This chapter defines and holds love for us in a way that comforts us and convicts us every single time we read it. And when I hear these words of love today, I think of the choice we have about how we live out our love. As Teresa has said, if we think to that cup, how we hold or we don't hold our cups, our lives, to receive the love of God. As God's beloved, how we receive love, how we hold love, and how we give love. As Joyce Rupp also says, I am simply an empty cup until I am filled with the loving energy of God. Today, friends, I'm going to talk about 3 cups, and these are 3 mugs. Here we go. The first cup. When I was college in London, I was serving as part of my internship as a volunteer through the Hine Street Methodist Church, and we were serving those who were unhoused, those who were homeless in London. At that time, they were calling them rough sleepers. So these were agencies that were going out and trying to be attentive to folks, but also in the case of Hine Street, for many years on Wednesday nights, they had welcomed people off of the street to come and to get warm and to have some biscuits. Those are cookies. They had cookies, and I got to help pass them out. Another big part of the evening was tea. Now, how many have been to England, right? The culture around tea is something that we as Americans can only minutely appreciate, the steeped tradition and the understanding of how one takes one's tea and what that's like. So this was an important moment for folks who had been on the street to come in and to warm up, but also to taste a certain degree of hospitality and seenness in this space. And so I volunteered, and we took people's little tuppence to exchange. We would fill up their cups. We would pass them out. We would give the cookies. I remember after I had been working there for some weeks that I was in the kitchen when I heard a commotion out in the fellowship hall. Now, we didn't know what was happening, and so the workers of us there went out into the fellowship hall, and it became that someone was yelling and very visibly angry and upset. And we didn't know exactly what was happening. There may have been another person involved, but this person was angry at one person in particular, and so was heaping those declarations of anger at them. And then before we knew it, he took his mug, that which we had offered to him in love, and he took it and he smashed it on the other person. I offer that because just in that way of gasping that you had, this was not what I saw coming. This was a safe space. This was a place people were coming following what they know of the violence on the streets, but something was so internally stirring for this individual on their journey in that moment, the anger that they could not hold that cup and sip and love and be in hospitality there. The anger came, and what could be an opportunity for extending blessing became an extension as a weapon. Now, at that point in time, I certainly had been witness to plenty of violence in terms of movies and the kinds of things one sees on the street. The evening news, especially living in Memphis, Tennessee, is rife with opportunities to learn about gun violence and other kinds of means of which we are crashing into each other and by which people are getting hurt. But at that point in my life, I realized as I began to process that moment, because I don't know exactly in looking back what I did right after that. I remember kind of being fixed to the space and not knowing what I should do as a worker there. The fight or flight response comes in. Should I be protecting other people? Should I get out of harm's way? What is this gentleman going to do? I don't know. So I don't know what I did in those moments. I know that there were shards of mug that would have needed to have been cleaned up. But I'm guessing that we were all holding our breaths, uncertain of what would happen next, until one of the volunteers who was more experienced there, and certainly older than I was at the time, helped to escort that man outside to a place where he could express and feel what he needed to feel in a different way. So I don't know exactly what happened, but I know that feeling that lodged its way into my container, my body, and it was one of fear. And so as I processed that and as I wrote about that moment, I realized that I had not been in that close of proximity. And I know that's a luxury and a privilege not everyone has, but to be in that close of level of proximity of something so violent and intentional happening right there in front of me. And so it's strange to think that as we're talking about cups of blessings, that that's what stuck with me. But it's the reality of the broken cup. It's the reality of the choice that we continually have of how we use our words and how we use our bodies, and the inner turmoil that we are often feeling, that so often people have chipped and broken cups of which they are trying to operate in this world. And so I do trust and hope that that gentleman would have gotten some of the help that he might have needed. But as far as that safe space in that basement at that time, the container that needed to be held safe fast for all, had held up the reality that all people are welcome. All people with the extended hands and cups are welcome, but not all behaviors are welcome. Not all behaviors are speaking of the love which God has for us. And we're continually, even in our own KC church, having to navigate that space of when people are unwell and they're holding the anger and things are so full, how we navigate that, and how we continue to try to be a big vessel of love. And so, friends, that was the broken cup. The second cup I want to talk to you about came this past week. Someone who had come seeking help from our community about 3 weeks ago as she was needing transition, an immigrant, came because she was looking for some help with her housing in particular. And so this past week, after she has now secured some housing in Baltimore, there was a plea that was put out on the email, and you, friends, responded so speedily. I had no understanding of how much people would be able to give in such a short span of time, but Casey showed up in a pretty tremendous way. Now, I know in such a quick time, not everyone can respond right away, but the people that did brought the things, and they put them on the porch, and those things, Rebecca and I transported up to Baltimore. And among those things, friends, is when we got up to that small apartment and the student was trying to sift through and take in with amazement what was being received by you, there was a mug in the box. And at one point, I got to take out that mug and to hand it and place it to her, and realizing, friends, as an extension of your love, this was a cup of compassion. This was a cup to meet someone who is in a place of lacking, in a place of great need. And it was a reminder that God fills us with love. The love that can become between two persons, can come between those who are strangers, can make strangers turn into friends. And the third cup, friends, the third cup of which I wish to speak is this one right here. This is a cup that has the symbol of a cross and a flame on it. It was given to me years ago by my parents. They are both retired United Methodist pastors, and on this cup is a symbol of the United Methodist Church, the cross and the flame. Now, this past week in the United Methodist Church was an historic one, and I want to make clear for those of you who may not be aware that Kinnimakundi is not affiliated with that denomination. However, our first pastor, Jerry Goethe, who was here for many, many years, was a lifelong United Methodist, and I'm looking at March because they've come out of that tradition. And I am also ordained in that tradition. So part of what enabled Jerry and myself to be here is that we were ordained in that tradition, and in honoring of that, you saw that and you said, we'll take a chance on you. So since my birth in the United Methodist Church, it's many congregations and churches that I have been a part of have been loving containers, holding places that have taught me about hospitality and love. And truth be told, it has also been a very uneasy place for me. When I was called to ordain ministry, I had to dig deep and ask whether I could join a denomination that had held exclusionary practices when it comes to the full participation, welcome, affirmation, and celebration of all people, especially LGBTQIA+ siblings. I only went forward at the time pursuing ordination because of the courage that my lesbian and gay friends in the church, both lay and clergy, continued to show me as they stuck with it. Their ability to be open about how God was pouring into them, even within a broken system, the larger of which continued to be flawed. This is what kept me on my path, with the deep and abiding hope that one day, the restrictive language and practices that have stunted the United Methodist Church would be lifted. I name all of this now because there was a major general conference. It was called the Postponed General Conference because of pandemic. So it has been many, many years since they met at this point, and there has been many disaffiliations, friends, of those churches who felt like they could no longer be a part of the larger umbrella. This general conference met in Charlotte, North Carolina over the last 2 weeks. And in the last several days, there has been the passing of legislation at the global level to affect all United Methodist churches that leads my denomination to a deeper space of being able to both receive and to flow out with the generous love of our Creator. Long overdue, and acknowledging the heartache of those who have since left the denomination or have died since they've seen this passing, those trailblazers who've continued to persevere in love. We know that sorrow for all who have been wounded in these past many decades, those who have left the church, and as I had said, those who have stuck it out. Suddenly, friends, and it's still something I'm digesting, just like it had to take me time to understand the fear that was in my body as related to that smashed cup. So it is also taking time to take in the wondrous reality of what transpired in these last several days. I can drink from this cup a little bit more freely, friends, because now in my denomination, we're getting used to the idea that the language that has been so restrictive has now been taken out. That the ways in which there has been indication that people are somehow of lesser worth, or somehow don't have a place, or somehow shouldn't be ordained, or somehow shouldn't be blessed or married, all of those pieces are not in the discipline any longer. And there are holes where those words were struck out. And there are still procedural things to do in terms of the adopting of our annual conferences regionally, but friends, it's what to do with that new space and the new impouring of which I believe the Spirit will be about, that mixes the sorrow, which has been this legacy of years of wrenching and divisions like at Corinth. How do we make space for this blessing to infuse and instill and to be a part of our deep and loving compassion that we would continue to hold as the broader church? And so I believe that we in our smaller non-denominational reality, this barn that we hold in Columbia, Maryland, we are still ecumenical in nature and connected to all these expressions of people that are trying to be Christ. And some of those expressions feel so foreign to what we follow, and some of them feel more akin to where we are going. And so I ask that if you feel so called to rejoice in your spirit with me, that no longer in the United Methodist Church is there that same sense of exclusion. This morning, and all over this region and this world, those congregations who are holding that tension of the sorrow and claiming a new reality in love are rejoicing. And it is in that spirit of rejoicing that we imagine a renewed cup of blessing, brimming with new possibility. As the bishop of this area said, it is a new day. It is a new day. Friends, I give thanks that God is able to hold patient and kind love. Love is patient and kind because God knows that I am not. Not as patient as I would like to be. But I give thanks for these long years that have seen us into this place, and that for each one of us, as you think to your journey, those times in which there have been broken and smashed and smattered cups, and those times, oh God, when you have felt the call of compassion, both receiving and giving as friends in Christ. And this morning, in the third cup, the belief that our churches, the institutions that we hold, the containers of which we choose to be a part, can be the place and space of God's future grace. So no matter how broken our cup right now, how much we are hurting or have been hurt, there is always room for love.